Right, so my name is Nock. I am a consultant working with Fairmile West, a consulting company focusing on technology and product development. But for my ills, I'm also the Vice Chair of the Institute of Engineering and Technology, Technical Network, which is industry-facing body working to inform and educate engineers in the media industry. And one part of that I do is actually getting involved in the IBC accelerators for the last couple of years, certainly. And ECOFLOW was one that drew our eye because we could help, because obviously the history of the IET is that it used to be called the IEE back in the day, and that covers the things like electrical power. So we thought we could help a lot there, and we did indeed. So what I'd like you to do now actually is let each of my panelists introduce themselves, starting with Kristan.
Hi, I'm Kristan Bullett. I'm CEO of Humans Not Robots. Humans Not Robots are a product company. We provide a cost measurement solution and data analytics that is financially focused, but it's also very sustainability focused. So we measure data points within companies' technology footprints and align that with their workflows.
Hemini?
Hello, I'm Hemini Mehta. I'm at the European Broadcasting Union. So in case you haven't heard of us, we are the union for public service media across Europe and a little bit beyond. I work in the Technology and Innovation Department, and as part of that, I work in sustainability in a number of areas, from high-level organizational strategies to green production and also technology.
And Tim?
Perfect. Tim Davis. I work in the technology team at ITV, who are the UK's largest commercial broadcaster.
Okay, so what we'd like to do, has it gone? No, too far. There we go. There we go, slide 2. That's a good one to have. Okay, so what I'd like to call on now is Tim and Kristan together to give you a sort of background on ECOFLOW as an accelerator.
Perfect.
So,
Colin helped set the stage a little bit talking about IBC accelerators. IBC accelerators are collaborative industry-based projects that are proposed generally by champions, and champions in this case are usually broadcasters and those with problems who come to the industry and look for ways of solving those problems. So ITV, along with some of the other participants, propose some challenges. We've been involved in a number of these, whether that is around the use of generative AI for content production, for virtual reality and XR performances, and for content and object-based television. We've been involved in a number of them over the years.
At the back end of 2023, so Humans Not Robots and Excedo, we are both quite focused on sustainability. So we have the joy of being in many sustainability conversations, and the timing was really good. So we were speaking to people at ITV and BBC and trying to move conversations forward to get a stronger understanding of the environmental impact of streaming. But that was a great opportunity to come together and make the submission for the IBC accelerator, and that's where ECOFLOW came from originally. The great thing was the logos we've got on the board here. The number of people that wanted to contribute to the project was phenomenal from day one.
Because we had quite a big scope and quite a lot of different things that we could have done, we divided the work last year into 3 separate work streams around build, measure, and educate. Build was around looking at what we could do within consumer equipment, generally kind of building bespoke interfaces that helped us to test different scenarios and understand how those screens reacted in terms of the energy that they were using to display that content, but also to test different ways of communicating with the audience, helping to provide them with tips and hints as to how they could understand and impact their energy usage. The second work stream was around measure, which was then understanding how that interface and how that screen behaved under those different conditions. What impact does the type of screen have, the type of content, and the type of conditions in which that screen was being viewed? And then the output of that was to use the kind of educate work stream to help then share that information. I think one of the things we were really keen on was creating a bit of a group that kind of learned, understood, and provided some kind of knowledge and some impact, but actually using the platform of IBC to then share that and kind of shout from the tops of the trees a little bit about the role that we all play in making the distribution and the production of content more sustainable.
And I think from like day 2 on the project, we recognised what a large challenge it was and how broad and deep the potential scope was. and where typically IBC accelerators projects stop after one iteration, like I said, from day 2, we already broadly agreed that this was going to be a long-running project.
Yeah, and from a kind of a broadcaster perspective, I think sustainability is a really large part of our agenda. It's a large part of who we are, and it's very much part of our social purpose, and it's part of something that runs all the way through ITV from kind of content production all the way through to distribution.
Okay, actually that presentation, that VT actually shows one of the most important things about sustainability, and that is that it has to run through everything you do, and there ITV certainly shows that. So let's get to the meat of the discussion. So ECOFLOW, was it about business or technology challenges? Would you like to go for that one, Tim?
I think business challenges and hopefully technology solutions is the right way to think about it. And ECOFLOW hopefully provides a bit of a link between those different things. I think there's lots of things that we could do. There's lots of potential technology solutions, but really it's about bringing it back to what are the reasons that we're all involved in this, and what are the drivers for it. From a broadcaster, I think my previous point, it's something that runs through ITV in terms of our social purpose and the audiences and the platform that we have for communicating with audiences. But there's also kind of very much commercial drivers around this as well. There's increased scrutiny, increased focus on the carbon emissions of advertising in particular. And so being able to be informed and engage in those conversations, and hopefully being able to drive them in a positive way, helps us to de-risk very kind of real financial risk as well.
And how did that translate to the European perspective, Hemini?
Similar. So members, the idea of sustainability is not just about cost reduction, although now that's something that's important on everybody's agenda, but also, as Tim mentioned, the idea of being responsible, ethical, all of those things. We're, as public service media, are scrutinized a lot more. So if any slips or mishaps happen, they're more likely to be amplified compared to some of the other content providers. So it keeps us on the good path, and it's really important. So and similar, it's got to be just as much as we have to collaborate with everyone in order to get this solution out. It's the same thing that we end up having to collaborate with everyone to make sure that we can reduce our costs and have business solutions, but let technology bring those.
And I slipped out a slide a little bit early on that one, but maybe this one maybe fits with yourself, your own view. From the technology aspect of it, this was one of our main outcomes was the map of how the entire supply chain comes together, and it probably shows the level of complexity.
So I think about the technology versus business conversation, and I think the project was very engineering-led, and that's reasonable because you need to pick the right things to measure and understand why you're measuring it, and understanding how then you move forward and provide reductions in some of those costs. You were in all of the conversations, the very low-level conversations about specifically what we're trying to measure, and with bodies like DIMPACT and EBU and Green Industry Streaming, to name a few, and IET, to name a few in there. It was easy to race into the very engineering-focused conversations. But if you look at this map here, which is probably going to be quite difficult to see in the room, there's a lot of stakeholders and parties involved here, and it is not just an engineering problem. How do you articulate what the environmental impact of streaming is in the right kind of language? And as Hemini said, there's financial costs involved here. To be able to appeal appropriately and get the right target setting for reduction, we have to turn this into a business conversation.
And in terms of, is that something that surprised you coming through this project? Was those one of the key things that surprised you, Kristan?
It didn't surprise me that we were very engineering focused in our conversations. I think it was a challenge for us to draw it back to a business-focused discussion. However, going forwards, that has to be one of the primary focuses for the project.
Hemini? Yes, very similar. So I came in with my engineering hat on and started looking at it from a technical point of view and finding a technical solution around it. And actually, you soon realize that the business side becomes a driver rather than what I thought would be the technical side. So.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, what surprised you?
I think the biggest surprise for me was the number of times that people said it depends. So every single question, generally the answer is, well, it depends. So what should we be measuring, carbon or energy? Well, it depends. You know, is this going to make a meaningful difference on the energy usage of this device? And the answer to that is almost always, well, it depends. Such a kind of complex and interlinked area that you can make recommendations or you can make conclusions, but only in very specific circumstances. And I think that was the kind of the biggest learning and maybe the biggest surprise for me.
Okay. And actually, I can, because I was involved as well, so I'm not just here as an independent person. What surprised me was the fact that there were things that, despite the many years of people working this across the entire world, there were still things that were new,
Yep.
still things that were not assessed, that were left out of the previous assessments, and therefore were pretty big. In fact, what surprised me most was actually how our calculation and determination and measurement of number of the energy used came up with such wildly different numbers depending upon that key depends phrase.
Yeah. It depends on what you're measuring. It depends on where you draw your boundaries and what you include in your scope and what you don't include in your scope. It depends what proxies you use for some of the things that you can't actually measure. That's why, quite often it just depends.
And also, the more you get into it, the more you realise you don't know. Those assumptions, those experiences that you may have had in one part of your world has a complete different outcome again. So it's really like the more you get into it, the more you try to learn, the more you realise you don't know.
And we weren't starting from scratch either, right? We were building on the excellent work that had been done by the likes of Greening of Streaming and Dimpact and EBU and the BBC and ITV and others over the years. We were trying to kind of bring some of that experience together, and we still were learning new things and coming up with new outcomes.
I think Donald Rumsfeld has a lot to answer for that phrase about the known knowns, the unknown knowns. Although one of the dirty little secrets of Donald Rumsfeld, he was very instrumental in the TV business at one point, as well as being a Secretary of State for the United States. But anyway, so what was the least surprising thing, Kristan?
What I want to say is, so one of the most surprising thing, but also the least surprising thing, was the level of support that people wanted to put into this. There's a long list of logos on one of the earlier slides. As soon as we started to discuss the scope of what we're trying to achieve of the project, people want to put time into this. Mm-hmm. And I think you were putting like 30% of your time in at one point. People putting significant hours into this. And if we look at the go forward on the next phase of ECOFLOW, we went to the pitch event 3 weeks ago in London, and people want to understand this problem and what we can achieve as part of the project.
So shall we go to that then, actually? What's the next phase? Because we're not finished, which is, actually, that's the least surprising. Well, this is the most surprising thing. There was no way we could finish. There was just too much. So ECOFLOW 2.
So we started out with the scope of everything, and clearly we had no chance of delivering that in the timescales that we had in the kind of roughly 12 weeks that you end up with these accelerators of actually working. So we started up very much on the right-hand side of that diagram, looking at consumer devices, so measuring screens and understanding how we could impact on players and clients within devices. So the goal now is to kind of move backwards with ECOFLOW to, as it says here, to dig deeper into distribution, increasing knowledge of what the emissions are and what the energy use is in the network, and actually kind of understanding the impact of technologies. We're in a little bit of a kind of a more broad peak sandwich here, which is perfect because it helps to show some of the solutions that are out there, how we can make distribution of content more efficient. There's a line between, I think we've called it here, investigate optimizations in pursuit of sustainability. Colin, that graph that you showed of the kind of the growth of average and the growth of peaks is a brilliant way of expressing that. There's an awful lot of waste. If you look at the difference between the throughput and the scale of capacity used to deliver a 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when there's not an awful lot going out, and then when you've got those multiple Premier League matches all being streamed, or ITV's next kind of England semi-final at the World Cup next year, there's huge amounts of kind of variability between the peaks and average, and the more we can do to smooth those out, to make better use of resources, the more sustainable our ecosystem becomes.
Actually, I think there's one of the interesting points as well. You had education in the first phase. It's going to be there as well in the second phase, probably very differently. But one of them was not just giving consumers the tools to manage their energy usage, but actually informing them of things they can do above and beyond what the technology could do. I think the classic one we have there is the watching your TV in the dark a little bit, maybe with your curtains shut, just to which reduces significantly the energy usage, even more so than many other more complicated things. And I think education was a key part of that, and Excedo helped a great amount of that with the UI layout, which we'll have a little bit of it at the end, just to leave you with that. But in terms of then the concrete steps for EcoFlow 2, what will success look like for EcoFlow 2, Kristan?
Building on what we did last year, if we can get to a strong position of isolating the distribution workflow, building very strong modelling around that so we can drive deeper understanding of, power measurement is the metric we're focusing on here, but a clear set of models that we can aggregate up and isolate to say these are the numbers that we're seeing here. I think that's one very strong piece to come out of this. I think if we can then improve on some of real measurements that factor into that model, as we focused on the first phase was very device focused, and we know there were challenges on getting data points further back into the supply chain. So if we can get strong data points there, that will be very positive. And I think if we can identify additional opportunities for optimization, and I think that's outside of the mod and the peer-to-peer delivery mechanisms, there's opportunities there.
And for the EBU here?
Similarly, what people may not understand, the measurements are really important, and they're important because they've never been done before. All the other research and background work that's been done has been done on models, has been done on assumptions, which vary greatly depending on which study you read. So the first time that we'll actually do it based on real measurements will be the first.
Yeah, that depends thing comes in quite greatly, because some people ask us about what do we think the confidence is on the measurements we're talking about? And we said, well, I think we're pretty good if we're a plus 200% or minus 50%, which probably shows the level of precision that people have today. And Tim?
I think the only point I'd add to that is we're starting to build a bit of a community around this. Actually, we've got a lot of organisations who care about sustainability, who are passionate about it, who are engaged, and part of the kind of the momentum that we've got is that we create that group, and we create that group in a way that can work together and can deliver things. So I think carrying this forward and continuing to deliver that, and bringing more people into that community, bringing more people into that group, so that they can take the information we've got and share it again broadly within their organisations.
Yeah, and who are we missing?
I think the things that we've called out in here around distribution, so CDN, ISPs, anybody who has either data, who has knowledge or information, or who has potential solutions to help us to kind of navigate some of those challenges, who can help us to make distribution more efficient. I think Mark, when he was talking earlier on, was doing a really good job of explaining the engineering challenges of delivering high quality, low latency, and scalable streaming. But I think adding a fourth pillar onto that says and sustainable in a way that makes best use of the resources.
Yeah, we really are. So if you are interested in getting involved in EcoFlow from whatever quarter, please do speak to one of us. We'll get you hooked up to the right people and talk about it and see if we can get you on board and delivering what we need to do in less than 6 months, just to draw the line in the sand there. Okay, so really, I don't know if we've got a time for a question from the audience. Yeah? So anyone would like to ask a question? I'll tell you what, I'm going to make a big impact now. Go home, watch TV, shut your curtains. You will save money, real money. You could even buy yourself a nice bottle of whiskey at Christmas from the savings. Or any other drink. Other drinks are available. Okay then, in that case, thank you for your time. And as I say, look forward to speaking to you in the corridors.